I'll just give a brief introduction about myself. So my name is Dipansh, and I'm working as a software consultant in Aldus in the test automation studio, and I have 3 years of experience in both manual and automation testing. So for this session, I'll be your coach, and before starting the session, I'll just go through the knowledge etiquettes. So please join the session 5 minutes before start time, and please provide constructive feedback, as this is my first session. So I would really really appreciate it if you can provide me your insights on anything that I might be doing right or might be doing wrong. And please keep your mobiles on silent, and if you need it's an important call, so you can please take that call, and feel free to move out, and please avoid unavoided chit chat. Yeah. Okay. So for this session, our agenda will be going through the 6 main points. So first, we'll be talking about the subscription-based ticketing platform, what it actually is, and then we'll try to compare it with our client for which we are working. We have been working since past 2 months. After that, we'll be discussing about the types of testing that were performed by our team, by the QA team, throughout this 2-month time. After that, we'll be discussing the challenges that were faced by the testing team. And also for each challenge, we will also discuss how we try to overcome those challenges using manual or automation processes. And after that, we'll also discuss about the tools that we use, that we have been using for end-to-end testing, and again for both manual and automation testing. And then we will discuss the test automation framework that we have implemented with the necessary tools. And after that, we'll just go through a quick demo, a small demo of what we have built for a client. So first is we'll discuss what exactly is a subscription-based ticketing platform. So it might sound heavy, but it's actually a very easy terminology, and I'm sure you might be aware of some other companies with this kind of model. So it's nothing but a ticketing platform where a user is provided some predefined plans and models. So a user or customer can select those plans based on his or her need. So for example, if you need to buy an airline ticket, so there are some companies right now that provide a subscription-based platform, so that if you want to travel from some major cities like Bangalore to Mumbai or Mumbai to Delhi, or within these cities, unlimited number of times in a month. So you can do that by taking their subscription, and the subscription can be around 50 to 60,000 rupees per month. But within that, you will be provided with unlimited number of flights within some cities. So it is happening that kind of model is now happening. We can see in India. So that's what we mean by subscription-based ticketing platform. And in this, basically we choose a plan that we want, and for that we are given a fixed number of credits or some thing which you can use to purchase tickets with those fixed number of credits, and those will be available to you for a fixed or a very number of months or time, and within that time you have to use those credits so that they do not expire, and you are able to take full benefits of the credits that were assigned to you. So the best example again that maybe you might be able to relate with your daily life would be Book My Show. So for Book My Show, there is one Filmy Pass that is provided by Book My Show team. So they provide a discount offering to subscription, which is valid for 50 days. And this costs around $100, and a user can get ₹75 off on their next 3 movie bookings, but they have to use it within 50 days. So it's kind of the closest example of to what our client actually provides. So let's go to what are a case study of a client, what exactly a client is about, what actually is their idea, and what they have in store for the future. So our client is a subscription-based movie ticketing platform. So they provide different tiers, or you might call it subscriptions, which grants the customer a certain number of credits that they can use to book tickets. So for example, a client has three tiers of subscription, like $10, $25, and $50. and using that amount, like you can purchase like whatever subscription you want and whatever you are comfortable with. And for those, you will be provided a predefined number of credits. Now those credits can be used by you to book a ticket within a month for any show. But the catch here is that like those credits, it's not like all the movies will have the same credits. So each movie and each showtime will have a different credit. And the facility that our client provides is that you can book the tickets from home, or you can also go to the theater and reserve the seat from there as well. So it's kind of like Book My Show that we have in India, but they have their own implementation or like own twist to it. And the idea behind this model that a client has is that each showtime for a movie will be assigned different number of credits, and this will depend upon the popularity of a showtime. So, for example, if we take a movie like Avatar second part is going to come within like this year, and we know that it's one of the highest grossing movies of all time, the first part. So definitely the movie will be very popular among people. So now, given the popularity of that movie, the seats will be filled like over the weekend and also maybe during weekdays. But most of people try to or prefer to go to movies over the weekend because that's when they are free and they have the time or availability of time like to watch these movies. So those movies which are like, or those show times that we have over weekends or holidays, so they will be a bit more expensive and they will have more credits assigned to them. And the movies that are that like show times that we have for a weekday, suppose like 1 p.m. On a Tuesday. So of course, like most of the people would be in office or like on their like at their work right now or at that moment. So at that time, like for that show, the credits will be less. So their idea is to encourage users to select show times that are not preferred by the general audience, so that the seats are filled even on odd show times. So that's the idea behind what like these models that our client is providing. And for future, our client has like right now they have launched a beta app for this for their tier subscription model, and they have launched it in a controlled demographic to see the user response, how they're responding to it, what what kind of response they're getting from customers. And once the response looks good, they plan to expand it within the North America to maybe Canada as well, and to other parts of US as well after a successful beta launch. So let's now come to testing and what kind of testing was performed by our QA team. So our responsibility from Nodus like was to to test the backend code only, not the front end. So the APIs and the data that was being fetched by the third-party applications. So all of that responsibility was with us, and that's what the testing scope was also for us to test the backend APIs that were created by our team. And so we had to perform multiple different types of testing, of course. So these are the main testing methods that we started in this project. So first one is the most important one of functional testing. So in this, we just tested the core functionality of our system. So for example, if we have a functionality where a user wants to book a ticket, so we have an API for booking a ticket. So how to book that ticket? So that functionality has to be properly tested, and all the things that we have in that API with respect to its parameters, so those need to be properly tested. So that is a one function of our application. So that's what we try to do in functional testing, and we tested multiple functionalities at different times so that we can each test them rigorously and see what if we are getting the expected response or not. The second was end-to-end testing. So in end-to-end testing, we tested with the perspective of an end user, and so an end user, for example, if you go to an app and you try to book a movie, so first thing you would do is you would select a theater, or you would select a particular movie, and once you select on that movie or theater, you will get some options like if you select on a theater, you will get show times for that theater and all the movies that are applicable for that theater. So from that list, you will then choose to select one screening which is which is appropriate for you, and then you will select on that screening, and then you will select the seat that you want to that is available to you, and then you will book that seat, and credits will be deducted from your application. So that is the end-to-end flow that we had to test from a user end perspective. So that's what we from QA team also did in the end-to-end testing. The next was the load testing. As we all know, like load testing is one of the most important testing methods that we have to perform for any application, and especially for our client, it was extremely important because the like our client was expecting around 10,000 requests per second, or maximum 10,000 requests per second, even in the beta launch. So definitely we had to see that the application can take that much load, even if it was beta launch. So for that we had to perform load testing and check the response time that we were getting under the expected load. The next is scalability testing. So as I mentioned, since this was only the beta launch, and even in beta launch, we were expecting around the maximum of 10,000 requests per second. So for scalability testing also, we have to see what is the breaking point of our application. So for example, if tomorrow our application is not in beta, they are like in the main app is released to the public, and now we are getting around 20,000 requests per second maximum at any given time. So is our application able to handle that much load? So we have to test that beforehand, and we have to tell the client breaking point of our application, so that accordingly changes can be made from backend side or from code side, and then we can do the load testing or scalability testing again and see if our application has improved on that aspect or not. Then we have smoke testing. So if you have a big team for any project, then you might have noticed that a lot of code changes are being pushed every day. So like if suppose like there are 8 developers working on the same application, so definitely there will be more like 3 or 4 build pushes like every day. Not just to staging, but maybe like, or not just to production, like maybe also your staging environment and also develop environment. So you want to have stable environment at each and every point of time, so that any changes that are being made by developers or QA team, so it does not break your application. So smoke testing is really helpful there, so that it kind of gives us a initial stability of an application when a new build is deployed. The negation testing is kind of superset of smoke testing, but it's a bit it's more detailed. And whenever any new changes are being pushed to the environment, be it staging or be it development or develop environment or production, we have to see that it does not break any existing functionality. So that is a bit like it is more detailed type of testing, but it is still a superset of smoke testing. Then let's discuss about the challenges and solutions that we took for those challenges that we faced during testing over 2 months. So first challenge that we faced was data validation. So huge amount of data was being passed to our application, and by huge amounts we mean like a lot of movies data, a lot of theaters data, a lot of screenings data. So this is a lot of data, and even if one movie is missing or one theater chain is missing, or even if one screening is missing from your data, that could create a bad user end user experience, and we definitely do not want that. So how do we rectify that, or how do we make sure that the data validation is happening properly? All the data that is being fetched from your APIs is being also fed to your databases properly. So for that, the approach that we came up with was writing automation scripts. So we wrote automation scripts. We first understood understood the functionality, and also understood the requirements from our client, and then we wrote automation scripts so that we don't have to check each and every movie data or theater data that we are getting from our APIs. So we wrote the code in such a way that the edge cases also can be figured out. So for example, one edge case that we found with our automation script was that the release year was coming as not properly for some of the movies. So the data that we get for movies, sometimes it is not very, like a lot of movies that are not popular. So for example, any South Indian movie, it might not be popular in US. So for that, they don't have the proper release date for it. So they just added a dummy value for it, like 2022 value. So those kind of edge cases were difficult for us to find from our manual testing. So that's where our automation scripts really helped us. Second was multiple build pushes. As I mentioned, that there were like multiple build pushes to environment every day. So smoke and regression testing had to be rigorous so that we do not miss any change or like any build that is like that breaks our environment. So for that also, we came up with the approach of automation testing with CI/CD, so that if there is any push to the develop branch or to the staging branch, so we can run a small smoke test or regression test, and then we can get that report and see if our regression test is working properly or not. So that's also how like that was also solved with the good automation scripts integrated with CI/CD. Then third was the third-party application or third-party APIs. So most of the data that we were fetching from our APIs, that was coming from third-party applications. So our client, they did not have this data on their own, like the movie data or the theater data. They do not have that data like with them in some database. We had to fetch that in real time from other third-party APIs, which are responsible for providing this data to the actual theaters in US. So all of the data that was coming from third-party API, that means that you cannot get desired results from with performance testing. Like we can make the changes in our APIs that we are creating, but the already existing APIs for some third-party application, you cannot make any changes to that. And even if you want to do performance testing, you are not allowed to do that a lot of times because their environment is just not ready to handle that much load for you to perform your performance testing. So how did we resolve that? So we had to optimize ourselves, and if third party APIs do not allow load testing, then we have to decide a benchmark from our side, that like we have to take a benchmark, like we have to get the response back in 3 seconds for each and every request that we're hitting. So that benchmark we have to take, and then we have to push our own code, see where we can remove the code smells and how we can improve to get our response time less than 3 seconds, or like whatever your benchmark is. Then another challenge we found was no test environment. I think a lot of us has faced that in at some point in our testing life cycle. So unavailability of dedicated test region means like one environment is being used by everyone for testing. So not just by QA team, but also by developers, also by client, also by front end team. So they're all looking forward to that one environment that is being set up, or the test region that is being set up. And it's hard to accommodate all of them in one environment, because again, like we are pushing multiple builds to the same environment. Multiple teams are working on the same environment. So definitely there were constraints between how we're going to test that properly. So how did we resolve that? So we had to come to a common ground, and it has to be discussed between all of us, whoever is using that environment, the client, front end, back end team, and also QA team, so that it does not hinders anyone's testing. And once we had some common ground, we were seeing good results when we agreed on a common thing. So for example, a client was testing in their onshore hours. So at that time, we pointed the environment to wherever they wanted it to be. And in our offshore time, since QA team was majorly testing, so we pointed it to the environment where we wanted it to work. So that's how we found a common ground between client and QA team, and also developers and front end team. The next challenge we faced was inconsistency in data. So as I mentioned, that there were some edge cases where the release date was not coming properly, or where the director's name were not like jumbled up, they were not coming properly. Somewhere because this data is not like everyone has their own approach to set up the test data. And if you're using multiple third-party APIs to get your test data, so definitely there will be inconsistency in data. So so you have to find the best approach, or you have to find the best testing process to find all those inconsistencies, and then get them resolved properly so that they do not create any issues in production. So definitely in this project we saw that the test data was coming very inconsistent. So it might be possible that your automation scripts might miss that. So best approach is to have a keen eye for these kind of things, and see like where how like see, there is definitely a pattern when it comes to the inconsistency in test data. It might be just over one field, because the name of the movie it might be same, but other information, it might be different for third party applications. So you have to see that, flush out all the inconsistencies with manual testing so that you can easily perform the automation on those things, and it does not create any issue for you in production. Then the last one was tight deadlines. So more features to deliver in less time. So more features like changes were frequent and multiple rounds of testing need to occur over same functionality. So again, so best approach for to resolve that was efficiency. So we had to determine what work can be easily automated and what works needs manual intervention. So make automation work for you efficiently. So functional testing, it might not be possible, and I think it is also not very advisable to do that automation, because automation does not solve everything for you. But regression testing, smoke testing, end-to-end testing maybe in some cases after you have performed everything. So these kind of testing, you can, if you need to perform them multiple times, so they can be automated easily, and then they can, like, automation can work for you, and or the other way around. So this was an end-to-end testing flow. So if you see, like, we have third-party APIs that we were fetching the data from. So this data was being fetched via scheduler that was run on a daily basis. So at a particular time, around like maybe some offshore time, so that it does not impact anyone onshore. And this scheduler was fetching the data for movies or for the theaters from the third-party APIs, and then we were using this scheduler to store this data to our databases. And at this point, if you see, so we had to do the to do the testing, that whatever data we are getting from APIs, if we are working on the data in any way, are we maintaining that same data, and are we putting that same data that is expected in our databases? So in this cases, our source of truth was these APIs. So this is my source of truth, and the data that is coming from these APIs is the same thing that I want in my database. So to do that, we have to check the count. Or suppose, like, if 100 movies are being fetched from this API, 50 is being fetched from this API, and then 100 another from this API. So we know that 250 movies are coming from total three different APIs. So are we putting these 250 movies in our database, or are we missing anything out of these 250? So we cannot check that manually, definitely. So for that, you can write an automation script, and that's how you can see that nothing is being missed. And that's what we did. We wrote an automation script. We compared this result that we get from API with the result that we got from our scheduler, or with what we stored in the database. And if we saw any discrepancies, we raised a bug for it. Then if data is correct or not. So that's what we were also checking when we are hitting the REST APIs. So now the data is now you're stored in your databases. Now how do you send it to front end? How do you send it to your application or the app that will be used by the end user? So those REST APIs were created by our team. But is the data that is being stored in the database is correctly being fetched by our APIs? So that validation also we had to do at this point. And that also, it was a mixture of manual testing and automation testing, because at this point we know at least that our data in database is correct, but now we have to see the REST APIs getting the data correctly from it or not. So it was kind of a subset of this entire data. So the amount of data was less, but still we had to validate each and every field. So it was a mixture of manual and automation testing to get the proper end result for us. So after the data is fetched correctly from with our APIs, the information is sent to front end, and from the front end application, the user can create a booking, or they can see the show times or applicable movies for any theater. And once they do the booking, so we store that information in our databases as well. and that's where also we were checking the information that this end-to-end testing, the end product of this is like create a ticket, right? So if that ticket is created correctly or not, the correct seat number or the correct credits were being deducted or not. So these kind of things also we had to validate in this end-to-end flow. So let's now talk about some tools that were used by us for end-to-end testing. So the first tool was like for Postman, which was majorly used for manual testing. We thought of using it for automation as well, but since we had to do a lot of validation, we thought best not to use Postman for it, because Postman we can do some minor validations like status code if it is 200 or not, or some maybe like field validation, but the kind of extensive validation that we required with respect to our databases and APIs, so that was not advisable or not possible with Postman. So we use the Postman only for manual testing majorly. Then for CI/CD, we had the optional GitHub action, and in Git, like it was not very difficult to create your own workflows and integrate it with our. That's what we use, GitHub Actions, and it was also being used by developers. So it was easier to connect with the development team and developers and get the desired result that we wanted. So to automate since our like testing majorly required us to test the APIs, so we use the RestAssured to automate the REST APIs using Java, and that was the best I think approach to test the APIs with the Java code, and it was like it provided us with the end result that we wanted. And then to create a framework, automation test framework, so we use TestNG. We'll talk about how why we used or why we chose TestNG for our testing, and for performance testing, we chose Gatling. We'll talk about why we chose Gatling as well. And for test management, we use TestLink to write all of our test cases and test plan, and so that we can track all of our test cases in a single at a single place, and it can be shared by client with client as well, and with other team members as well if they want to check our test cases. So why did we use TestNG and RestAssured together? So one major thing that we like saw with TestNG and RestAssured was that there is a provision to group multiple tests together in testng.xml file. So if you have to test an API, so there might be like 2 or 3 happy paths to test that. For example, if you want to book a seat, so for booking a seat, you have you can provide the seat number, you can provide the correct screening ID and everything, and you can create a booking successfully, and then you can also check that booking in your database. So that was your happy path that we can definitely write for automation using a normal Java code. But now we also have negative test cases with respect to our APIs. If we remove header from that API, how is our API responding? If we remove for example, like a path parameter from our API. So how is our API responding? Is it giving us correct error responses? So now that gives us like for the same API, we're getting around 10 to 15 test cases. So if you want to write all of those test cases separately, so the best approach that we thought was to use TestNG. So in TestNG, we have @test annotation, and with that, you can create a separate test for each and every test case that you have, and that can be easily automated using RestAssured for all the API heads that you need. It is also very easily integrated with Maven, the TestNG framework. So that was a big plus for us. And annotations are easy to work with. Documentation is very easily available online, and it is also not very difficult to work with when it comes to annotations. The HTML report generation, there is an inbuilt report generation from TestNG side, but that is not like it is not very user friendly or very lucrative looking. So we went with report ng. That is also kind of similar to TestNG, but it gives a slightly better report than TestNG. So again, like that is not the best, I would say, report. We can definitely enhance that by creating our own Excel report, but at least report ng provides us with an inbuilt reporting software, so you don't need to explicitly write any code for creating your Excel final reports. And then there are attributes in TestNG to help you run as per your priority. So for example, depends on method. So like if your method is depending upon like if your test case is depending upon another method, So or another test case. So how can you automate that properly? So TestNG provides us with annotations like depends on method to uh, automate that. And if your like first step in the first step itself, if your test is failing, so the depends on method will not run, that will be skipped. So that is a good provision that we thought for our test cases. And with RestAssured, TestNG can also be used to generate different tests, each calling different API, just as we discussed in the first point. So this way, like the positive and negative test cases can be covered easily and with proper validation. And next is like, why did we you chose Gatling for our performance testing? So real-time monitoring can be done with the dashboard that we have. And so like it's a good option that we have in Gatling. It's a faster and easier setup than the other options that we have in market. We have an excellent reporting mechanism in Gatling, which is like auto-generated reports, and it is very easily understood by a client, or like maybe someone who's non-technical, so they can definitely understand those reports easily with a little bit of explanation or like going over the reports. And though the difference is negligible, getting Gatling handles the load better as compared to JMeter. Again, the difference is negligible, but if you're getting something better than another application, then why not use it, right? Then we have good assertions to do basic validations with response. So like for example, we had cases where we were caching the result, and we had a lot of issues with caching, like the testing of caching portion. So how do we validate that with our performance test? So we don't usually do a lot of validation when we're doing performance testing, because that is not the point of performance testing. But still, Gatling, like we have basic validations or cert that we can use, good assertions, so that these kind of issues and caching issues we are not, like we do not see in our performance test. And we were able to catch one bug because of that, because of this assertion. So Gatling did prove helpful in that case. Then let's come to discussion of CI/CD integration with the GitHub Actions. So how did we achieve good results for our regression testing and smoke testing with the CI/CD integrations with our GitHub Actions? So a different repository was created in GitHub for our automation code. So we wanted to keep our code separate, or automation code separate from the exhibitor service or the scheduler code that was written by our backend developers. So we did not want to mess up the Scala code, and we don't want to mess up our automation code. So we wanted a different repository. So GitHub Actions, it provides us a good GitHub workflow, where we provide the workflow dispatch as this trigger, and using that workflow dispatch, you can trigger your GitHub workflow or your Maven steps easily. So how did we achieve that? So there is like another GitHub workflow was added in a backend Scala repository, which would trigger our automation GitHub workflow. So whenever there is any push to the develop branch or to the staging branch to our backend code, so the GitHub action that we have in the backend repository, that will automatically trigger our automation code that we have in another repository. So this was run using GitHub's API. The GitHub provides good API for that. You can provide the GitHub repository endpoint that you want to hit, and also which branch of GitHub you want to execute the code from. So that's what we did. So whenever there was any push to develop branch or staging branch in our environment, it would trigger our automation script, and it would then like send us a report of how many test cases were passed and how many test cases were failed. So this is how we did our smoke testing and regression testing efficiently, so that whenever there was any new push, so we can see if that new push was working properly or not in an environment. And yeah, as I mentioned, so we had like HTML report generated by TestNG, and we added another GitHub action in our workflow, which can send us an email with the final results, and you can check the report if test cases were passed or failed. Okay, so we have prepared a small demo for that. So let me go to report. Unfortunately, I cannot show the actual repository that we have the code in with CI/CD integration. So I have created a dummy project with the code that we have, and a small subset with like around 8 to 10 test cases, so that I can run it from my local and show how the test cases are being executed with respect to our automation. So we have the TestNG file in our project, and as I mentioned, we use the Maven Maven build. So like in this, we have like testng.xml in the framework, and in this we can provide the class name that we want to run. So it's very easy in TestNG to comment out or like run the particular class that you want to run or all the particular test cases that you want to run with a single click. So like for example, I have my test cases over here in this Java class. So we have used @test annotation to define all of our test cases that we want to run. And this is like simple Java code where we are doing assertions like a normal validation if it is running, giving us proper results or not. And once this is run, so we get a report, HTML report, and we can validate if, how many test cases were passed or failed. So let me run it from my local. So I had to shut off a lot of loggers because we do not want to reveal any secure things from our project. So that's why I had to switch off a lot of test cases and loggers for this dummy project. So as we can see, like once it is run for like completed properly, so we can see how many test cases were passed or failed. So build was successful, and because there were no failures in our test cases. If you want to see the report, so we can go to the same project, and in the folder we can uh, open this report. So this is not the inbuilt report that we have in TestNG. This is using the report ng plugin that we added. It's a bit plain or simple, but it can be enhanced depending upon your need. So if we click on this, we can see how many test cases were passed and how many test cases like were failed, since there were like no failures. So all of the test cases were passed, and we can see the time, how much it took for all of these test cases to pass properly or not. So that's how you can create a robust automation framework with the TestNG, and these reports can be sent over to you over email with your CI/CD integration, so that you don't have to trigger these manually from your side and check these. Go to like check these by going to the GitHub repository and then checking there. Like we have good options with that. Yeah. So I think that's it from my side for this session. Any questions on what we discussed?
Any questions from anyone for the session? Okay, if not, then we can wrap up this session. But if you have any questions, you can contact Dipansh directly, and he will be able to clarify any of your doubts. So thank you, Dipansh, for the wonderful session, and it was really insightful. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for giving us your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dipansh and Ankur. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.